You're exhausted. You've already worked 50 hours this week, and it's only Thursday. You have plans tonight that you've been looking forward to for weeks. And then your coworker stops by your desk with that apologetic look on their face and asks, "Hey, I know this is last minute, but could you help me with this presentation? It'll only take a couple hours." And even though every fiber of your being is screaming, "No," even though you're tired and overextended and this isn't even your job, you hear yourself say, "Sure, no problem." And the second the words leave your mouth, you hate yourself a little bit. You cancel your plans. You stay late. You help with the presentation. And you go home feeling resentful and used and angry, not at your coworker who asked, but at yourself for saying yes. Again. I know this feeling intimately because I lived it for most of my life. I was the person who said yes to everything. Every favor, every request, every demand on my time and energy, I said yes. Even when I didn't want to. Even when I didn't have time. Even when saying yes meant sacrificing my own needs, my own rest, my own goals. I couldn't say no. Physically couldn't. The word would get stuck in my throat like I was choking on it. And I told myself I was just being nice. Just being helpful. Just being a good person. But really, I was slowly drowning under the weight of everyone else's needs while completely ignoring my own. It took me years to understand why I couldn't say no. And it took even longer to learn how. But once I finally did, once I understood the psychology behind this compulsion to always say yes, everything changed. My relationships got healthier. My stress levels dropped. I had more time and energy for things that actually mattered to me. And ironically, people respected me more, not less. So let's talk about why some people can't say no. Because if you're one of those people, and I think you know if you are, understanding the why is the first step to changing it. First, there's fear. Deep, primal fear that sits at the root of most people-pleasing behavior. Fear of rejection. Fear of conflict. Fear of disappointing people. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being seen as selfish or mean or difficult. Fear of being abandoned. For me, it was fear of rejection. Somewhere in my childhood, I learned that my worth was tied to how useful I was to other people. If I could help them, if I could make their lives easier, if I could be the person they could always count on, then they would keep me around. But if I said no, if I wasn't useful, they might decide they didn't need me anymore. And that terrified me. So I became the yes person. The reliable one. The helper. The one who never complained and always came through. And people loved it. They loved having someone they could always count on. They loved that I never pushed back or set boundaries or made things difficult. And their positive response reinforced my behavior. See? Being useful works. Saying yes keeps people happy. Saying yes keeps you safe. Except it didn't keep me safe. It kept me exhausted and resentful and invisible. Because when you can't say no, when you say yes to everything, people stop seeing you as a person with your own needs and wants. They start seeing you as a resource. Someone who exists to make their lives easier. And that's not a relationship. That's being used. But I couldn't see that then. I just knew that saying no felt dangerous. It felt like I was risking the relationship, risking their affection, risking being left alone. So I kept saying yes even when it was killing me. There's also this thing where people who can't say no often have a distorted sense of responsibility. We feel responsible for other people's feelings, other people's problems, other people's happiness. Like it's our job to make sure everyone around us is okay, even at the expense of our own well-being. I remember my therapist asking me once, "Why do you feel responsible for fixing your friend's problem?" It's her life, her decision to make. And I looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Of course I was responsible. My friend was upset. I had the ability to help. How could I not help? Wasn't that what friends do? And my therapist said something that honestly blew my mind at the time. She said, helping when you genuinely want to and have the capacity is friendship. Helping when you don't want to and it depletes you is martyrdom. And martyrdom doesn't actually help anyone in the long run. She was right. When you help people out of obligation rather than genuine desire, when you say yes when you mean no, the quality of your help suffers. You're resentful. You're half-hearted about it. You might even sabotage it unconsciously. And the relationship suffers because there's this undercurrent of resentment that builds over time. But more than that, when you take responsibility for other people's feelings and problems, you're actually robbing them of their own agency. You're treating them like they're not capable of handling their own stuff. You're not trusting them to be resilient adults who can cope with disappointment or figure out their own solutions. I had a friend who would call me in crisis several times a week. And every time, I'd drop everything to talk her through it, give her advice, help her solve whatever problem she was facing. And this went on for years. Until one day, I was going through my own crisis and I needed support, and I called her. And you know what she said? "Oh, I'm really busy right now. Can we talk later?" And I was stunned. I'd been there for her hundreds of times, and the one time I needed her, she couldn't make time. And then I realized, I'd taught her that my needs didn't matter. I'd trained her to see me as the helper, never the helped. I'd made our entire friendship about me being available for her while never asking for the same in return. That was a wake-up call. Because I saw how one-sided I'd let the relationship become. And it wasn't even her fault. It was mine. I'd created this dynamic by never saying no, never setting boundaries, never communicating my own needs. There's also this element of control that people don't talk about enough. When you can't say no, when you're always helping and fixing and accommodating, there's a subtle power dynamic at play. You're making yourself indispensable. You're ensuring that people need you. And as long as they need you, they won't leave. It's a fear-based strategy for maintaining relationships. Instead of trusting that people like you for who you are, you make them dependent on what you do for them. And it feels safer because you're in control. You're making yourself valuable through your actions. But it's exhausting. And it's built on a shaky foundation. Because what happens when you can't help anymore? When you're too tired or too busy or you finally hit your limit? Do those relationships survive? Or do they crumble because they were never about you as a person, just you as a resource? I found this out the hard way when I went through a difficult period and couldn't be the helper anymore. I was dealing with my own stuff and I needed support rather than being able to provide it. And some people in my life completely disappeared. They didn't know how to relate to me when I wasn't being useful to them. And that hurt. But it also showed me which relationships were real and which were transactional. Another reason people can't say no is low self-worth. When you don't value yourself, when you don't believe you're inherently worthy of love and respect, you try to earn it through service. Through being useful. Through never inconveniencing anyone or making demands. You operate from this belief that you're not enough just as you are. That your presence isn't valuable unless you're doing something for someone. That you have to constantly prove your worth by being helpful and agreeable and accommodating. And saying no feels like admitting you're selfish. Like you're putting your needs above someone else's, and that's the worst thing you could do because your needs don't matter as much as theirs. At least, that's what you believe. I used to think people who could say no easily were just more confident or more assertive or maybe just kind of selfish. But now I realize they just have healthier self-worth. They believe they're valuable as people, not just for what they do for others. They trust that the people who truly care about them will respect their boundaries and stick around even when they say no. There's also cultural and gender conditioning to consider. Especially for women, there's enormous pressure to be nice, to be agreeable, to put others first, to not make waves. We're socialized from childhood to be caretakers, to be nurturing, to prioritize relationships over our own needs. Saying no is seen as unfeminine, aggressive, selfish. We're called difficult or bitchy or high maintenance when we set boundaries. So we learn early that saying yes keeps us safe and liked, while saying no makes us threatening or unlikable. I see this play out so differently for men and women. When a man says no at work, he's being decisive and protecting his time. When a woman says no to the same request, she's not being a team player. The exact same behavior is interpreted completely differently based on gender. And this conditioning runs deep. Even when intellectually you know you have the right to say no, emotionally it feels wrong. It feels like you're violating some unspoken rule about how you're supposed to behave. Let me tell you about the moment I finally started learning to say no. I was in my late 20s, completely burned out, working a demanding job while also helping everyone in my life with their problems, volunteering for every committee and cause, running myself into the ground trying to be everything to everyone. And I ended up in the hospital with stress-related health issues. My body literally shut down because I'd pushed it too hard for too long. And lying in that hospital bed, I had this moment of clarity. I thought, I'm killing myself trying to make sure everyone else is okay. And for what? Do they even appreciate it? Or have I just taught them that I have no limits? My doctor told me I needed to reduce stress, and I actually laughed. Because how? How do I reduce stress when I have all these commitments, all these people depending on me? And she looked me dead in the eye and said, you start saying no. You start disappointing people. Because the alternative is disappointing yourself right into an early grave. And that hit me hard. Because she was right. I was so afraid of disappointing other people that I was completely willing to destroy my own health and happiness. The math didn't make sense. Why were their needs more important than my survival? So I started small. Really small. Someone asked me to volunteer for something, and instead of automatically saying yes, I said, let me think about it and get back to you. And then I actually thought about it. Did I want to do this? Did I have time? Would this add value to my life or just more stress? And when the answer was no, I sent a message saying, thanks for thinking of me, but I can't commit to this right now. No elaborate excuse. No apologizing profusely. Just a simple, clear no. And you know what happened? Nothing. The person said, no problem, thanks anyway, and asked someone else. The world didn't end. They didn't hate me. They just found someone else. Because that's what people do when you say no. They figure it out. That was revolutionary for me. Because I'd been operating under this belief that if I said no, I was letting people down in some catastrophic way. But actually, when you say no, most people just shrug and move on. It's not the big deal you think it is. But here's where it gets tricky. Some people don't take no well. Some people are used to you saying yes, and when you start setting boundaries, they push back. They guilt you. They tell you you've changed, you're not as nice as you used to be, you're being selfish. And this is the real test. Because these are often the people who were benefiting most from your inability to say no. They're not upset because you're doing something wrong. They're upset because you're no longer allowing them to take advantage of you. I had a friend who got genuinely angry when I started saying no to her constant requests for favors. She told me I was being a bad friend, that she'd always been there for me, that she couldn't believe how selfish I'd become. And for a moment, I almost caved. I almost went back to saying yes just to smooth things over. But then I thought about it. Had she actually always been there for me? Or had our friendship always been one-sided with me giving and her taking? And I realized it was the latter. And her anger wasn't about me being a bad friend. It was about me no longer being a convenient friend. That friendship ended. And it hurt. But it also made space in my life for healthier relationships with people who respected my boundaries and didn't see me as someone who existed to serve them. Here's what I've learned about saying no. It's a skill. It's not something you're either naturally good at or not. It's something you can learn and practice and get better at over time. Start with low-stakes situations. Practice saying no when it doesn't matter that much. No, I don't want fries with that. No, I don't want to sign up for the rewards program. No, I can't make it to that event. Get comfortable with the word in your mouth, with the feeling of declining something. Also, you don't need to justify or explain every no. No is a complete sentence. You don't owe people elaborate explanations for your boundaries. I can't, or that doesn't work for me, or I'm not available, are all perfectly acceptable responses. And watch out for the apology reflex. People who can't say no often say, "I'm so sorry, but," before every boundary they set. You don't need to apologize for having limits. You don't need to apologize for taking care of yourself. You're allowed to say no without feeling guilty about it. It also helps to remember that saying no to something is saying yes to something else. When you say no to a request that would drain you, you're saying yes to rest. When you say no to a commitment you don't care about, you're saying yes to time for things you do care about. When you say no to someone else's priorities, you're saying yes to your own. Your time and energy are finite resources. Every yes is taking those resources away from something else. So you have to choose. And choosing yourself sometimes isn't selfish. It's necessary. I also think it's important to distinguish between genuine generosity and people-pleasing. There's nothing wrong with helping people. There's nothing wrong with saying yes when you genuinely want to and have the capacity. The problem is when you say yes out of fear or obligation or guilt. When you say yes when you mean no. True generosity comes from abundance, from wanting to share what you have. People-pleasing comes from scarcity, from fear that if you don't give, you'll lose something. They feel completely different. One is energizing. One is depleting. And people can tell the difference. When you help someone because you genuinely want to, they feel it. Your energy is positive and engaged. When you help because you feel obligated, they feel that too. There's a resentful quality to it even if you're trying to hide it. So saying no more often actually makes your yes more meaningful. When people know you'll be honest with them, when they know you'll only agree to things you actually want to do, your commitment means something. They trust that when you show up, you're fully there, not resentfully going through the motions. Here's another thing nobody tells you about learning to say no. It changes your relationships. Some get stronger. Some fall apart. And that can be scary because you might lose people you care about. But the truth is, if a relationship can't survive you having boundaries, it wasn't a healthy relationship to begin with. Real friends, real partners, real family, they want you to take care of yourself. They respect your limits. They don't want you to help them at the expense of your own well-being. The people who get upset when you start saying no, who try to guilt you or punish you for having boundaries, those people were never actually on your team. They were using you. And it's better to know that and let them go than to keep draining yourself for people who don't actually care about you. I lost some relationships when I started setting boundaries. But the relationships that remained got so much better. They became more balanced, more authentic, more mutually supportive. Because I was finally showing up as a whole person with needs and limits, not just as a service provider. And I made new friends too. People who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. People who had their own healthy boundaries and respected mine. People who understood that friendship is about mutual support, not one person constantly giving while the other takes. The other beautiful thing about learning to say no is that you start to understand your own priorities. When you say yes to everything, you never have to think about what actually matters to you. But when you start being selective, when you start protecting your time and energy, you have to decide what's worth saying yes to. What do you actually care about? What's actually important to you? What do you want to spend your limited time and energy on? These become really important questions when you're not just reflexively saying yes to every request. And answering those questions helps you build a life that actually reflects your values instead of everyone else's. You start spending time on things that matter to you. You start pursuing your own goals instead of always helping other people pursue theirs. You start living your life instead of being a supporting character in everyone else's. So if you're someone who can't say no, if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in these patterns, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not weak. You learned these behaviors for good reasons, probably to keep yourself safe in environments where saying no wasn't safe. But those survival strategies that protected you then might be hurting you now. And you can learn new ones. You can learn to say no. You can learn to set boundaries. You can learn that you're valuable as a person, not just for what you do for others. It won't be easy. It'll be uncomfortable. Some people will push back. You'll feel guilty at first. You might even feel selfish or mean. But I promise you, on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Freedom to choose how you spend your time. Freedom to prioritize your own well-being. Freedom from the crushing weight of everyone else's expectations. Freedom to be yourself instead of who you think everyone needs you to be. Start small. Practice in safe situations. Build the muscle. Notice how it feels when you say no and the world doesn't end. Notice how much lighter you feel when you're not carrying everyone else's burdens. You deserve to have boundaries. You deserve to have your needs met. You deserve relationships where you can say no sometimes and still be valued and loved. The word no isn't mean. It's honest. It's respectful. It's necessary. And learning to use it might just save your life. It saved mine.